Welcome to the Life Unscripted Podcast with Rosabel, the place where genuine conversations meet inspiring stories, personal growth, and a dash of humor. I'm Rosabel, your host, inviting you to embrace life's unpredictable journey. Celebrate your unique story and find joy in everyday moments. Get comfortable, stay curious, and let's explore together. Unscripted, unapologetic, and unstoppable. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Life Unscripted Podcast with Rosabel. Today we have John. John, he is an author, a storyteller with a passion for thrillers and suspense novels. John, how are you today?
Good. John Bukowski. All my novels are under my name, John Bukowski.
Yes, I wanted you to pronounce your last name. I didn't want to chop it.
Well, thanks for
I appreciate you. One of your most notable works, if I'm not mistaken, it's Project Suicide, right?
Yeah, Project Suicide was actually my first novel. I have a copy here. You can see the cover. And it's a story of a cure for Alzheimer's disease that is perverted into an assassination drug. Now, high-profile politicians are killing themselves, and only a drunken genius can save the country.
Wow.
Pretty good, huh?
Where have I seen that before?
I don't know. I don't know if you've looked at my, that's part of the back cover blurb. So if you've looked at my book.
Gotcha. There's also Checkout Time.
Yes.
And Bad Pennies.
Bad Pennies was the sequel. It's my third book, but the sequel to Project Suicide. And in this, hero and heroine, Deacon Creel and Amy Robbins, are pursued by a villain from the past, villain from Project Suicide, who rises from the grave, as it were, to seek revenge.
Wow. Let's talk about your personal background and writing journey. Can you tell us about your journey into writing thrillers?
Yeah, my journey is a little bit unusual in that I have 2 doctorates and a master's in biological type sciences. I have a DVM, Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, and practiced in southeastern Michigan for about 7 years. And I transitioned into public health and got a master's and PhD in public health, and then went on to do that for about 20 years, and then went into medical writing as a contractor. And I've actually circled back to one of my first loves, which is in high school, high school undergrad, I had like 3 passions. One of them was history. To this day, I've been studying military history for about 60 years. I hate to say it. The other was English, reading, writing, been an avid reader all my life. Spent many a summer afternoon in air-conditioned comfort of the Detroit Library, reading books like H.G. Wells and Jules Verne and, Rocket to the Moon and those kind of things. Leather Stocking Tales by Fenimore Cooper. So that was another big one. But my passion, the third one, was science. And I decided to focus my career in science. And when you do that, especially if you want to get into veterinary medicine, you've really got to be focused on the academics. So I had to kind of put those other things in the back burner. And so now in my dotage, I have circled back to my love of writing. Always wanted to write a novel. I did about 10, 12 years ago. It's still on my computer, probably never be published. But it was my first novel. I felt really proud of having done it. And it got me started to write short stories and other novels. And I got my first one published. That was Project Suicide in 2022.
What could you say that inspire your novels?
Lots of things. Certainly ideas you get from life, from movies. I remember for Project Suicide, I was driving back from visiting my father-in-law, who has since passed away, but he had a relatively mild form of dementia. And, he was a brilliant automotive engineer from Detroit. And now he was having trouble figuring out what time of day it was, which is sad. And I was thinking, boy, I hope they find a cure in the not too distant future. And I started thinking, what if they find a cure? And this is very important for writers. What if? Most good book ideas are based on what if. What if they find a cure, but there's a side effect? And what if the side effect's bad? What could the bad side effect be? Well, death. But you don't have much of a novel if people just if they find out people die from taking this. But I thought, whoa, wait a minute. What if it causes you to kill yourself? There's a genetic link that it blocks that causes you to loathe yourself and want to kill yourself. And so now you got the idea that maybe you got a book in that. And then the third what if, which was the real one, is what if you give it to a person who doesn't have Alzheimer's disease? They'll still kill themselves. So it's the perfect assassination drug. You are totally out of it. The person takes their own life, and there's no idea that they were even assassinated. So that was for Project Suicide.
Wow.
As far as other books go, like my second novel, which was Checkout Time, that's right there. That's about a arsonist who's trying to extort money from hotel chains, giving money or I'll burn and blow up your hotels. And he's pursued by a handsome government researcher modeled after myself and a beautiful FBI agent until he turns the tables and the hunters become the hunted. And I came up with the idea for that years before I started working on novels. I was on a business trip and noticed a trap door in the ceiling of a hotel room. And I put, wow, you could put something up there. I'm sitting on the bed and I look up and I see this. Well, what would you put up there? Well, what if you put jewels or something up there or mob money? Well, then you've got, and maybe it falls at this guy's feet when he's on a business trip. Well, then you've got a certain type of thriller, a crime thriller. But my first really strongest inclination was to put a bomb up there. And the reasons are twofold. Number one, I'm a bit of a pyromaniac. Growing up, I liked anything that exploded or burned. And I think that's true for a lot of guys. I've heard people who were in the engineers, military, and they say, the most fun of my job, you build and destroy. The most fun of the job is blowing stuff up. And so to me, that was, okay, it was a bomb. Why? There was a movie in the 1970s called Roller Coaster, which I really liked. It was a fast-paced thriller. Nobody much has seen it. It had George Segal in it and Richard Widmark and a bunch of other good people. And it's about a guy trying to extort money from amusement parks. Pay me money or I'll blow up your rides and kill off your guests. So I said, okay, juxtapose the two. Hotels instead of amusement parks. And that's really how Checkout Time came to be. So it's always this movies you see, ideas you get. I keep a list of ideas on my phone as they come to me. And I learned, don't say, oh, I'll remember that. Because I don't. It's like you wake up dream and you go, oh, that's a really great idea. If you don't write it down, you're not going to remember it. So I keep a list on my phone and I use them for short stories or if they have more meat to them for novels. So yeah, just from observing things and people, you pick up characters just from watching people in restaurants or people stuff like that. So it's kind of like actors. We observe life and channel that.
Excellent. And I was actually about to ask you, what would you consider to be your creative process and methods for building perhaps the suspense? So I could see that some of your creative process.
That people who want to write, you have to realize, I've heard many authors say this. Stephen King is one of my influences. He says this. 2 things you have to do to be a writer. You have to write a lot, but more importantly, you have to read a lot. If you read thrillers or watch thriller movies, things like that, you're going to learn kind of through sublimation, osmosis, how they go together. You learn kind of where to put your cliffhangers, at the end of chapters, so people want to keep reading, things like that. And the main thing about thrillers, and that's primarily what I write some other stuff too. But the thing about thrillers is they have to be thrilling. There has to be a constant movement toward a peak showdown, a peak climax, and lots of obstacles have to be thrown in the protagonist's way. And they have to overcome those and go on and on, ever escalating like a roller coaster. Go back to the roller coaster movie, until you reach this climactic moment. And once you reach this climactic moment, there's lots of little climaxes going up. Once you reach this climactic moment, then the book generally ends fairly quickly. Because for a thriller, you've achieved your goal. You've taken the reader on a roller coaster ride you've got the finish to it, and now it ends. So that's
So,
basically how that
yeah.
process.
And your novels do tackle intense themes, right? But what is that message or emotion that you do hope your readers take away from your work?
Well, there's always a bit of a character arc. The characters go through a certain change, certain up and down as you go through it. But the thing is with thrillers, and this is something I like about it, what I like about thriller movies like 3 Days of the Condor and things like that, is they're primarily there to entertain. That's like if you go on a roller coaster, it's a roller coaster ride. There's no real message to it. You're looking for a thrill. You're looking for fun. And that's kind of what thrillers are. They build a world, and you have to make the world interesting. You have to make the characters interesting. You have to make the characters likable. You even have to make the villains likable to a certain extent, or at least interesting. You don't want a dull villain. In general, you don't want anything dull, but you don't want a dull villain. And try to get people to immerse themselves in that. And you take them on the roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
That's
And
true
what is
for,
that? Yeah, I was just going to ask you, what is that, with all that, what is a typical writing day for you looks like?
I typically write in the morning, anywhere between an hour and 3 hours. Rarely would I do more than that. Sometimes I write in the afternoon, but typically in the morning. And that's another thing. I mean, if we go back to Stephen King again, he's probably the most prolific writer in modern, living. And James Patterson might be more, I don't know, but Stephen King is very prolific. And he writes 2,000 words a day. That's a lot. The average writer probably writes 500 to 600 words a day. I probably average about 750. Some days I'll do 1,200. Some days I'll only do 400. But it's usually in the morning, in this office right here. And people have asked, can you write anywhere? And I think you can, but it has to be comfortable. At least for me, it would be tough to write, for example, in a hotel room. I don't even bother trying. Some people do. Stephen King used to come home and their trailer that they lived at after working 2 jobs at like midnight, and he would sit in the furnace room so he wouldn't disturb his wife and kids, and he would write for like an hour. That's unusual. Most people, I think, need a kind of comfortable space that they can kind of free to kind of let their mind expand. They always say you should write while you're drunk and edit while you're sober, because drugs are kind of a mind expanding thing, and you need to let your mind kind of flow.
Right. When did you learn that? I know you said that this was not. When did you say, okay, I want to be a writer, or did it ever cross your mind or?
Well, when it actually happened, it was, I think, the first time. I'd always thought about writing a novel, but I was like so many people. You think about it and you don't do it. One day, I'm going to write the Great American Novel.
Yes.
But I was writer. I was a technical writer at the time, doing medical writing, journal articles for companies, website content, things like that. And the Great Recession hit. Remember back at like 2008, 2009, the market tanked, companies were having trouble staying open, and no one was paying for consultants, contractors like me, to work for them. So business dried up. And unfortunately, that was a financial issue, but it also gave me the gift of time. So I said, I've always wanted to write the novel. I have time now. I have at least several months until business picks up. My wife was working, so we're good. And so I started to write. And I learned, I already knew I liked to write. That's why I was in medical writing. During my research phase, when I was working for companies, they would more and more give me things to write rather than research to do. They knew that I was good at it. So I already knew that I liked to do it, and I was relatively good, at least at the technical aspect. And I learned that I was also decent at the writing of fiction. And more importantly, that I had the discipline to do it. and to finish it. I always tell people that you've got to treat it like a hobby. You have to do it because you love it or driven to do it. And as a business, you got to do it every day or almost every day. So many people start books. Most people were like me originally. I want to be a writer, but they don't. Many people start books and they never finish them. They have 6 or 7 unfinished, 1,000 pages, 10,000 pages into it, and that's it. You have to learn the discipline of every day adding. And that's what it is. It's like when I was doing my doctoral dissertation. It's daunting when you look at it. It's daunting to think I got to write 80, 90,000 words. That's a lot. A story that people want to read. But if you're not really writing 80, 90,000 words, you're writing 600 or 700 words a day. So it takes you 6 months or 8 months, but you get there because it's like with the alcoholic. It's one day at a time.
Right. One day at a time. That's right. And little by little.
Yeah.
They get something.
Big things like that. Like I said, it's like a doctoral dissertation. You got to do all the research, and it takes years to do the research and do the statistics and write it up and all that stuff. But you're just doing a little bit every day.
Right. And on that line, I was going to ask you, what advice do you have for any aspiring thriller writers, particular thriller writers?
First of all, like I said, you got to read a lot, write a lot. If you want to write in a genre, you have to read the genre. I've had people tell me, I'm going to write a coming of age book for a girl, some guy. And I go, well, have you ever read any? No, I'll just write it. It's like, well, you're unlikely to do it well. So read a lot and read in the genre that you want to write it. And the second thing probably is don't expect it to be perfect right away. They always say the key to writing is rewriting. You get something down on paper which you may not even like that much. But once it's down there on paper or on your computer, you can work with it. And that's where this doing a little every day comes from. You sit down and you don't really feel it. You can still write something. And later on, you may have to change it, which is fine. Sometimes you have to write big sections of it. I have a horror thriller that I am peddling right now to publishers. And I was stuck on it for a long time. And finally, I said, I'm just going to finish it. And I bowled through it. I didn't like it, but I bowled through it. It was 120,000 words. So way too big for a thriller. But then over the next year, I worked on it and pared it down and changed some things. And I got it down to 94,000 words, which is spot on, good for a thriller. And I like it. And I think other people would like it too. And that's how you do it. So that's what I would say is number one, read a lot. Number 2, don't give up. And number 3, try to do it every day. And don't worry too much if it's not great at the beginning.
Absolutely. Yeah, the do not give up is a very, very good one.
Yeah.
Because that's the easiest one sometimes to do. To give up seems to be.
What typically happens is people have a really good idea and they start writing it. And they have a good idea for the beginning. And sometimes they have a good idea for the end because those things often come to you. This guy's going to do this and this, and eventually he will die in a plane crash or whatever. So you've got the beginning and the end. But that's like 20,000 words. It's the middle, the 60,000 word middle that makes people stop writing because it's all about developing the characters, developing the plot, putting in these obstacles and stuff. It's much more difficult. So that's something to what they call the mushy middle. Don't get upset by hitting that and slowing down. Maybe you're writing 1,000, 1,500 words a day in the beginning, and you hit the mushy middle and you're only writing 400 a day. That's okay.
Yeah, a lot of work in progress, a lot of learning, rewriting, re-editing, and even republishing.
Yeah, and that's the thing is people, a lot of people think, I'm going to write a bestseller. I'm going to go away for 2 months, write the book, send it to an agent, they're going to take it, and everything's wonderful. When in fact, it's probably going to take you 6, 8 months, a year just to get the first draft. And then you're going to spend another 6 months to a year doing 3 to 5 revisions before you even send it to anybody. You may do 2 or 3 revisions, then send it off to a beta reader, a fellow writer or whatever, and say, what do you think of this? But before you send it to an agent or a publisher, you're going to probably have revised it 4 or 5 times anyway. And this all takes time. And then if they like it, it's going to be another year before it's published. So you can't just be working on one thing. Otherwise,
Right.
you'd have big gaps between your works. So you finish the first draft, you take a week off, and before you go back to do your first revision, you're writing something else. Maybe you're doing that for a month or 2. Then you do your revision. Then you write something else. So there's always something in the pipeline.
Yes. It's like a kitchen.
Yeah. And as I always say, no matter how long it took you to write that first book, if a publisher likes it, they're going to want to see the second one within a year. So you could take 5 years polishing your book and get it just where you want, but don't think you're going to have 5 years for the next one.
I hear that. I hear that a lot. Now, are there any upcoming projects or novels that you're currently working on?
Yes. I mentioned the horror thriller and 2 other books. This one was just published, I think May 5, and it's called The Peeper. And it's a story about a serial killer who hunts on the internet, and he finds victims and kills them and removes their eyelids as a trophy. So he's the peeper. And it just so happens that my everyman protagonist, Randall Corlane, who works for government as a kind of a small level bureaucrat, also goes on the internet quite a bit. And him and the peeper become intertwined in the eyes of the police and other people. So that's how that thriller kind of plays out. That's the background behind it. So this one just came out from Rogue Phoenix Press, and I have another one that is going to be out hopefully sometime this year through a Western U.S. publisher, Page Turner Books, and it's called And a Child Shall Lead Him. And it is not a thriller. It is actually, you could call it chick lit, which means it's kind of like a Hallmark movie. It appeals to women more than men. Although I love a lot of the Hallmark movies, and so maybe I'm unusual. But so that one I hope will come out sometime in this year, maybe Christmas, who knows. But we're working on revisions now with the editor. So those are the things that are currently working on. I've got another couple things in draft. I've got 21 published short stories in various anthologies and magazines. And I'm also working on, since I have 21 published stories, I'm working on my own anthology, which I hope to have published sometime in the next year or 2.
Wow, that's interesting. Very good. And where can our listeners connect with you? Where can they find your work?
Right. All my stuff is on Amazon or anywhere like Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore. If you have a bookstore you like to go to, they can order any of it. It's all done through Ingram, and they distribute everywhere.
Do you have a website?
I do. It's thrillerjohnb.net, thrillerjohnb.net. You can find links to most of my books. I haven't updated with this brand new one yet. But also, the easiest way to get to my existing books, the 4 that are currently out, is basically just to do the book title novel.com. So it would be checkouttimenovel.com, thepeepernovel.com, badpenniesnovel.com, projectsuicidenovel.com. And those take you right to the Amazon page. And I'm also working on an author's page, which will have all my works together on Amazon. But if you've ever worked with Amazon on anything, we're trying to work through the problems now.
Yes.
They can be a little trying. It's a big bureaucracy as well.
Yes, I can definitely attest to that. If anything else, I always ask this question, what was a message that you would like for the audience to take with them today?
A couple of things. One thing, like I said, if you want to be a writer, don't think you can do it without reading a lot. Reading any genre helps, but certainly the genre you want to write. And write a lot. Try to do it as a daily thing. And another thing, if you read somebody's work and you like it, leave a review on Amazon or Goodreads or whatever, but Amazon is the big one. And because that really helps the writer. People base whether they're going to purchase a book sometimes based on those reviews. And
That is so true.
Amazon places you for how people can see you based on reviews.
Yeah, so, and people don't leave enough reviews, actually.
Right, and it's easy to do. You just go to the page. There's a thing, leave a review. You click it. You put a title in, give it a few star ratings, write 2 sentences, or you don't even have to write anything. You can just give it a star rating,
Yeah.
And all those help. And it's really simple to do. And if you wanna say to an author, I really liked your book, the best way to do that is with a review.
Yeah, that's a great advice right there. I have interviewed a few other authors in here, and it's just amazing. I mean, like some of us, I'm an author myself, but I'm self-published. I just published a book February. I actually have it here. I don't know, so you can see it right here.
Was it say succeed? You're a little blurred.
Yes. So it's called The Courage to Succeed, A True American Dream. Talks about my life growing up in Colombia and so on. It's an interesting read. It's like 100 pages, Amazon as well. And that's one of the hardest things, to get people to leave a review. So
yeah, I don't know why that is, because like I've gone to book clubs where people, 20 people say, I love the book, well, it's great.
Exactly. That's exactly why I say it, because I get people
review and maybe 4 do.
Yeah, I get messages, I get emails, I get text messages, and I'm like, but please write it down, because that will definitely help. That's how things are going these days.
It's
exactly.
Nice. You like it. Tell Amazon you like it.
Yes, that's exactly what the same thing with the YouTubes and everything, because today, even, your doctors,
Yeah. So that would be my advice. Little self-serving.
That's actually great advice. There's something else I was going to ask you. Okay, well, is there anything I have not asked you that perhaps you wanted to tell our audience, our listeners?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you well.
Is there anything that I have not asked you?
I would only say that if you go on my website, and I think I sent you author links, I have a email list landing page that if you click on that, you can be taken there and just put in your email address, and I'll put you on my monthly newsletter. You don't get inundated with stuff every day. It's about once a month. I'm too lazy to do more than that. So you don't have to worry. 1 page once a month. And so you can find out about works in progress, what podcasts I'm going to be on, and things like that. So yeah, if that's the best way to keep track of what I'm doing, that and my website, fiddlerjohnb.net.
Perfect.
That's basically me.
No, that is awesome. I know I asked you about but we did talk a little bit about what comes in the creative process, and perhaps did we talk about character development a little bit? Now, when it comes to these characters that you put in your books, do you have a favorite one? I know it's kind of hard, because I bet you probably like more than one, but.
Yeah, I like them all, or I wouldn't have written them.
Right, exactly.
But probably my favorite is in Checkout Time, my protagonist, who is a government researcher, which I was for a while, and his name is Thomas Tomasinski. So naturally, people call him Tom Tom. And the beautiful FBI agent, her name is Sally Butterworth. So naturally, people say to her, Sally Pancakes. And so that's kind of a fun interaction with them. And of course, he hates Tom Tom. He got teased as a kid. So naturally, everybody in the FBI and stuff that he runs into calls him that, as is typical of people once they find out you don't like something, that's what you're called. It's like the monikers, the call sign names that fighter pilots get. It's usually the thing you hate the most that they stick out of you. So I like that character. He's a good guy, and writing that book was probably the easiest book I've written, because none of them are easy, but this is probably the easiest because things kind of just kept going. I think I probably wrote it in something like, 5 months or the first draft. So that's one. There's also a character in this book, a kind of a country Jake detective named Doolittle Powell, and I liked him a lot.
Yeah, and it's not for me. It's not easy. Maybe in the future I'll venture like to write about characters or though. But you were so right when you say for us that love to write. I've been writing since I'm a kid. I do a lot of journaling, right? And I have this idea of this novel for the longest time where I know exactly like, okay, who is this? Who is that? What's going to happen at the beginning, at the end? But then think about that middle part. It's like, okay, that
Yeah.
requires.
The nice thing there's two ways to go about writing. There's many variations on these, but there's two basic ways. There are people called plotters, where they say, okay, this is the outline for my book. And they go through, 5-10 pages. This is going to happen. That's going to happen. This is going to happen, blah, 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 blah. And then they fill it in, out to 70, 80,000 words. And that works really well for things like that are formulaic, especially. It works for anything if that's the way you like to do it. There's no right or wrong. But it works for things like traditional murder mysteries, because you need to know where your red herrings are, where your clues are, blah, blah, blah. And then there's things called seat of your pants writers. They just sometimes call us pantsers. And pantsers, you get an idea and you start with it, and you let the idea and the characters tell you where it's going to go. You just let it go. And that's how I tend to work. And it's fun for thriller writing because you hit surprises and they surprise you. I didn't know the character was going to do that. I didn't know so-and-so was going to die until I got within 5 pages and I said, ooh, this will be what happens because that will cause this, and then I can do that. And it works kind of in spurts like that. But because it's a surprise for you, it's a surprise to the readership.
Yeah.
And that works very well for thriller writers, horror writers. Stephen King does it that way. One of my other favorite authors, Elmore Leonard, wrote that way. He's passed away. But so yeah, there's two ways you can do it. But like I said, the main thing is pick something that works for you and work on it a little bit every day. And so when you get to that middle, if you haven't thought of how to do it, have you thought 2 pages ahead? Well, then you write those 2 pages and think on it for a day. And typically when you expect it, a new idea comes in that gets you for another 5 or 10 pages.
Yes.
And it just works that way. That's how the mind works. That's why I say, right when you're drunk, I'm not encouraging people to get drunk. Many writers have been drunks. Stephen King, Ernest Hemingway, another my influences, and it's kind of mind expanding, and you got to let it go.
Have you ever?
One thing that Stephen King says that I really like, it's in his book, The Dark Half. He says that we're all human beings, multiple. We have the person we show the world, and then we have this dark side where our passions are, our envy, our jealousy, petty thoughts, homicidal thoughts, all that stuff that we don't act on. And most people keep that hidden. The fiction writer's got to let it out. If you don't let it out, the work is constricted. It feels tight. You've sometimes seen a movie or read a book that just doesn't seem authentic. That's usually somebody constraining what they will say or can say.
You can actually pick up on them, on that.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Stephen King's never killed anybody or saw a monster, but that doesn't mean he can't write about it.
And talking on that, I actually wanted to ask you, have you ever thought about any of your work going into TV, like I don't know, a series or anything like that? Have you considered it?
Yeah, people often ask me that, and I would love it. I mean, most writers would love it. I mean, what's not to like? Something you've written, and forget the money even for a minute.
Right.
Something that you've written gets put into a different artistic form that expands your audience. People see this movie and they now, I want to read what that guy wrote, that kind of stuff. The problem is getting in front of the right people. It's very tough to get it in front of the creative people unless you're somebody like Stephen King or James Patterson or Elmore Leonard. And it's not something you can really do on your own very easily. You
Yeah.
could write a screenplay, but who's going to produce it? That takes millions of dollars, contacts with the right people and all that stuff. People like Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, who wrote Good Will Hunting, they spent like a year or 2 years writing the screenplay. And then they spent another several years hanging around Hollywood, trying to meet people, trying to get people to read the play. It was like a full-time job. So most people won't do that. So that's the problem with it. I would love to have it done. It's only positives. But if you know of anybody,
well, I think the biggest thing is, my thing is, can you imagine like finding the right people that can actually capture your vision? How do you envision like to make it really? I've seen all these stories about this series that go on, and people were like, well, they end up being like, this is not what it's supposed to be, what it's like.
Yeah,
or
I've heard people
depictions.
say this. They ruined my book.
Exactly.
The movie ruined my book, which to my mind is impossible. They can't ruin your book. Your book exists. The paper's here in black and white. And even if the movie's totally different,
Right.
it's still exposing people to the idea of your book. And you can now put on the cover of your book now a major motion picture or now a Lifetime movie, whatever. And so it's only, as I said, it's only a positive. They can't really
because
really
it brings out the conversation, though. Actually, people get even more interested, and
right.
They start like, let's make a comparison.
Right. It's fine if people say it's a completely different medium. It's fine if people say, I watched the movie and I liked your book better, or, it was so different from your book. That's fine. It's a movie. It's not a book. So it's going to be different. It's just some extent.
Yes.
You can't put 300 pages in a 2-hour movie.
It's tough.
Yeah. So,
kudos to those.
They're going to pick different aspects to focus on. They're going to change some things, take the characters in different directions. That's all fine. It can't ruin your book. Your book's your book.
That's a good way to look at it. I don't know if it was because, like, for example, my book, it has elements that, for example, like when I think about put it into motion picture, let's think that I'm thinking that, right? I would like for the character, because it also talks about my life, right? So I want it to be very close to, to the characters, to the people,
that's a little different when you're dealing with nonfiction.
Yes.
Fiction is one thing, but you can't play as fast and loose with nonfiction because it has to be factual to a certain degree. There's historical facts and individuals that you have to portray honestly, if for no other reason than you don't want a lawsuit. But, if they're living individuals.
Right. So, and also the culture, the differences.
Yeah, I would think that would be a little different. But certainly for nonfiction, as long as it gets exposure for your book, it's a positive.
Yeah, that's interesting. Usually I write, the opposite. I usually write nonfiction.
Nonfiction, right.
It'll be interesting to write fiction. It's not a bad idea.
Fiction is a matter of you can't be afraid to make stuff up. I always tell people, I teach I teach some classes in writing at a conference in Louisville, Kentucky, Imaginarium. Fun conference if anybody wants to go to it in July. But one of the things is about research. And I talk about, don't forget while you're doing research that you're not writing a technical manual. You're basically telling a bunch of lies, but you want the lies to be believable. You're making stuff up, but you want it to be believable. So that's where the research comes in. You need enough where it's believable, where people say, "Oh, that guy knows what he's talking about. I'm going to follow along." But the main thing is, it's a lie. It's fiction. You're making stuff up out of your head, making a story out of it, creating people. So don't be afraid to do that. Don't get so hung up on the technical details that you hurt your story, because your story is not about the technical details. It's about the characters, what they want, what they have to overcome to get that, how they interact with each other, that kind of thing.
Very good. Well, I encourage listeners to check out John's I'll call John's piece because I cannot pronounce it. What was that?
Bukowski. Usually having trouble with the last name. A lot of people.
Yes. So connect, and then social media too, right? You're on social media?
I think I sent you the links for my Facebook.
Yes, I'll put them in here, yeah.
Accounts.
The show notes.
Yeah, I'd love for you to follow me on Facebook or on X. I still want to call it Twitter.
Yes.
Yeah, and
awesome.
Feel free. On my website, it's got a thing where you can contact me. Feel free to ask me a question. I'll sign books for people or whatever.
Yeah, leave comments too. Comments are important. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm also going to be at Killer Nashville in a conference in just outside of Nashville, Tennessee in August. So
perfect.
If anybody wants another good conference, that's a good one to go to.
That's awesome.
I want to tell you that Checkout Time, my second book, came in second place in the Book Fest Awards, and it was a finalist in both the Imagine Awards from Imaginarium and the Silver Falchion from Killer Nashville. So I was very proud of that.
Wow, congratulations.
Thanks. It was the first awards that I tried for, first book I ever sent out for awards. So it was neat.
That is great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing insights and telling us all about. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are wondering, like, what do I need to do to even start writing my first book, right? No matter the genre. So thank you so much for those tips that you left us. So again, for our listeners, please make sure that you check John B's, check his work and connect with social media, leave messages, and leave a review.
It was my pleasure, and thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. You guys have a great day. I want to invite you, yes, you listening right now, to check out my book, The Courage to Succeed: A True American Dream. It is available now on Amazon and also Barnes & Noble. This is a story of resilience, grit, and what it really means to chase your dreams, even when the odds are stacked against you. If you ever face fear, failure, or uncertainty, this book will meet you right there and remind you that courage always has a voice. Just search The Courage to Succeed: A True American Dream by Rosabel Zohfeld on Amazon, or head to the link in the show notes, because your dream is worth it and your courage can take you there.